everybody. My name is Miss Gilman. Welcome to my salon. I'm going to be doing a 90-degree haircut today. Before every video I show you, I'm always going over the PPE that we have to wear now due to COVID. So again, it's the mask, it's the gloves, it's the safety glasses, and it's the aprons that have to be changed for every client. The clients have to wear capes that are either disposable or you're washing them every time. And we're wiping down everything, disinfecting everything before our clients. So it's been quite rough this year. I'm going to take off my PPE because there is nobody in the salon at this time, and there shouldn't be any clients. I have one coming in at 5, so I have a little bit of time here. So I'm going to take off the gloves. You'll see me move if a client does tend to walk in or if State Boards walks in. But right now we're safe. So I'm going to teach the 90-degree haircut today. I feel as though this is probably the most difficult haircut for students to learn because you're pretty much working within the same measurement throughout the whole head. So if you could measure every strand on her head of hair, it should be 3 inches long or 4 inches long or 5 inches. Like everywhere should be a certain measurement. I think that's why it's so hard. A lot of kids get lost with their traveling guide. They tend to not know if they see it, and they're cutting when they don't see it, or they're taking too big of sections. And basic geometry will tell you if you've got a piece of hair here, but you're pulling it from maybe way over here, it's going to appear shorter by the time it gets there, right? It could be the same length if you take it out perfectly from the head, perpendicular. But once you start to drag it over, it will appear a different length. So it's very important that you take very small sections and you work right within the space that you're working so the 90 comes out good. I'm going to tilt her head forward. I do section my mannequins into 5 for the 90-degree angle. For the 90-degree haircut, and that's short layers. So the long layers, the 180 in my other video, is for longer hair. It gives longer layers. This is going to be for shorter hair, and it gives shorter layers. The 5-section parting, it's the same that I do for the 180, the long layers. So same parting. Typically when I'm doing haircuts, I always do a blunt cut and then some type of layers. In a lot of my videos, you're only going to see one blunt cut, and then you're just going to see me go right into the layers rather than wasting the time with the blunt cut again. But typically for a client, I am doing 2 haircuts. I'm doing a blunt cut and whatever they want for their layers. So when I'm working for a 90, I only start and I kind of think about the back of the head into 3 sections. So I'm going to divide it here. That's going to be one section from occipital to nape. Then from here to here, kind of in the occipital area. And then from the high occipital to not quite the apex, but the crown area will be my 3rd section. So I would just work right here for the meantime. And I'm going to 90 the bottom, and then I'm going to 90 the middle, then I'm going to 90 the top. Okay, so that can be your first section. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in the center mohawk area. So it's just going to be a small section right in the center. I comb the hair on either side out of my way. Because there's a bit of an angle here, you wouldn't pull the hair straight out this way, because it kind of slants down the comb. So we're going to kind of drag it down a tiny, tiny bit. Not much, but not quite at a 90 for this first cut, just because the way that the head shape crooks in, kind of like a question mark. So we're going to drag it out like this. I try not to cut into that blunt cut. So a big thing with a 90 is you want to leave the length this piece right here, this is her length. If you start chopping into that, at the end of the haircut, her blunt cut isn't gonna look the greatest. So what I typically will end up doing is I will cut right before the blunt cut. So I'm gonna trim right here. And excuse me again for my ergonomics and my cutting techniques. I'm just trying to get out of the video's way. So there we go. I'm gonna move to the right of the mannequin head. This is a traveling guide, so I left a piece and I'm taking a piece and I'm going to take very, very small subsections, making sure I'm in complete control. And you want to be able to see your guide, which I can. So there's my guide, and there's the hair I'm cutting. Not much, it's just right there, little bits. So I hope you can see that in the video. So always make sure you can see your guide. And again, this is a traveling guide. So take a piece, leave a piece. You should be working right in front of the section. I don't want to get in the way of the video, so I'm going to be kind of sidestepping a little. But you really should always stand right in front. Making sure again that you can see your guide. And it's tilted down a little bit. The rest of the sections are going to come straight out at a 90. It's just because the hook in the neck, that question mark neck area, nape area, we're giving it a little drag down. Again, coming out at a 90, or roughly a 90 from where that area of the head is shaped. And trimming right down, making sure you can see your guide. And last piece here, right there it is. You can see that. And I didn't cut into the blunt cut. I really stopped cutting before I hit her nice length. I'm going to come back to this side. I want to find the guide from the middle section. And there is my guide. I hope you can see that in the video. It's very obvious where the guide is. And it's a traveling guide, so I'm going to take a little, leave a little. And then it travels around the head with you during the 90-degree haircut. There's the piece that I'm cutting to. And last cut here on the side. Okay. Same way for cross-checking, you want to take a horizontal slice. To cross-check, you go opposite the way you cut. So I cut vertical for layers. I'm going to check horizontal. And I'm not picking up this. The reason why I'm not picking up that is because I didn't cut into that. That's my length. I don't want to hack really any layers into that. I want it to stay nice and even. But again, I'm not cross-checking way up here at a 90 because I didn't hold it there. I held it a little bit down because we talked about the neck going in ever so slightly, okay? So what I want to do is I want to just make sure that that is indeed a nice straight line, and it is. Now notice when I say that earlier in the video I mentioned that you have to be careful because the hair really on here it's going to drop first, and on here it's going to drop first because it had the furthest distance to travel, right? So if I pick this up, the hair on the sides should fall first because they had the farthest distance to travel. This piece would be left in my hand the longest because it's right here. These had further to come, so they're going to drop first. That is still okay. You could, walk around the sides and kind of make sure that over here and this all looks straight as you walk. That's okay, and everything does indeed look good. All right, so that's the nape. I told you we're going to take another horizontal section. We're going to cut now the middle section. Please always put the clips back somewhere else on the head. Don't put them on the ground. Don't put them on yourself. That's they become unsanitary. So we want to make sure they stay in the mannequin's head or the client's head. So this is my middle section that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to section up this very last crown section. That will be the last section I do. Again, making sure you wet the hair. Okay, so we've cut that very bottom section. Now we're going to cut the middle section, but we are going to use the bottom section to dictate where we're going to take the middle section to. So comb this out of your way, always starting in the middle. If you've noticed in all my videos, it's always like the center mohawk, the middle, and I always explain if it's a traveling or a stationary guide. This again is a traveling guide. Might be a little thick for my hands. I might slim it up a little bit. So, and now this is held out at a 90, okay? So we're getting away from that crook in the neck where it's kind of like the question mark shape, and we can start to come straight out at a 90 now. And this right here, I hope you can see it in the video, that's my guide, and this is the hair that's to be cut. So coming straight out. I always use the very last piece of the guide, okay? Because the curvature of the head starts to shape back out, so you don't want to cut it way down here. We want to cut it to the very last piece so it flows nicely. So straight out. Straight out. Take a piece, leave a piece. I'm going to work to the left side this time first. I know the last time I think I went right first. So straight out. And then there's your guide. You should always be able to see your guide. Take a piece, leave a piece. Cut to a new piece. This guide is traveling with you. Make sure you can see the guide you cut before. And I think you should be able to see that fairly well. Take a piece, leave a piece. Again, make sure you can see the guide. Take a piece, leave a piece. Small 1/2 inch subsections, and you want to make sure that you're coming right out from the head where you're at. Okay, so we're going back to the center. And now we're going to cut through the right side. So we want to make sure you see your guide from the center. And you want to make sure you're cutting a new piece, so you've got to make sure that you see something. See, so right here, this was it. This was all I had to cut, so I clearly didn't take a strong enough new section of the hair that needed to be cut. So I want to really just take a little less of this, because this has already been cut, that's clear. And I need to find what looks like, wow, that's where I cut. Ah, see how much hair now? See? So that's a very obvious piece of section that I want to cut. Take it straight out, cut to what I see the guide, the traveling guide before. Take a piece, leave a piece, moving over. And again, I can see my guide, and I'm cutting right to it. Take a piece, leave a piece. Making sure we can see it. leave a piece. Traveling guide. Straight out from the head at a 90. You should be standing right in front of where you're cutting. I'm not doing that just because I'm trying to do the demo in the video. And then this is my last piece. Again, straight out from the head at a 90. Making sure you see your guide. All right, so now we can cross-check the same way that we have been doing. So that means to take a section straight across. Again, the sides are going to drop first because they have the farthest distance to travel. So taking the hair out of my hand, holding it right up at a 90, the same degree that I cut. Sides dropped first, yep, and that's good. All right, so now moving up, this is my last sections through 3 and 4 to cut. We want to make sure we wet it down. Okay. Again, I always like to start with the center middle mohawk. And I'm looking for that middle guide now, so that's going to dictate where I'm cutting to. And you want to get the very last piece because that would be, see, I don't want to cut to this piece, I want to cut to the very last little piece of guide. And if you can't hold all the hair in your hands, please get rid of some. And there's my guide, right there in my finger. And you just want to work up the curvature of the head. And then as you get to the top, this should be coming straight up at a 90. So it's kind of like you're curving around the head, right? So it's like, it is circular, so it's not a perfect straight line. It's curved, the head shape is curved, so you have to go with a curvature. So there's my center mohawk. I'm gonna go to the right, take a piece and make sure you can see your guide. Make sure it's nice and obvious, and it is. Make sure you recomb and you're coming straight up, and you're coming straight up at a 90. Take a piece, leave a piece. Take a new section. Make sure you can see the guide, which you can. Coming straight up, we're at the crown, and almost honestly to the apex of the head. Take a piece, leave a piece. And there's my guide. I think what students tend to do is they recut over sections they've already cut. So you have to be super careful where you are, where you're going, what you've already cut, what you haven't cut, and just being able to see the guide and know which piece you should be cutting to. And always moving the hair so it is at a 90 for where you're at on the head. Because that's different all over the head, right? A 90 on the sides comes straight out like this. A 90 here is straight out like this. A 90 here is straight out like this. A 90 here, as we know, is a little bit angled down because of the curvature of the neck. So the 90 becomes very relevant in terms of head shape. Last section, straight out at a 90 for where you're at on the head. Coming up, as it gets higher, it should be at a 90. So that's my, oh, I don't know how that happened. Okay. All right, so back to center. Now let's make sure I see my guide and I take enough of it. There's nothing to cut. So what happened? There's like a little straggling. So that means that I didn't take a new piece from her right side. So I got to dig back in and make sure I actually have a piece so I have something to cut. So that's what I mean. You don't want to cut if it doesn't look like there's anything to cut. It's a very, very obvious map what you're cutting. It should become very obvious, and you should be able to, you'll be able to see it more and more the more experienced you get at hair cutting. So take a piece, leave a piece. Making sure you see your guide. Take a piece, leave a piece. Making sure you see your guide. All right, so there's your short layers. And we'll do a really quick cross check so you can make sure that it is indeed even. So again, opposite the way we cut, horizontal, straight up at a 90, however you cut it here, and just making sure that it looks like a nice straight line. And it does. And then get this out of your way. And you don't need to cross check the whole thing because you already did it. You've been doing it for every section, or you should be. And again, the sides will fall first, and that's okay. All right, so now we're gonna move on to section number, I don't know if you wanna call it 2. The middle section here. Okay, so again, I'm gonna take a middle center mohawk piece. Okay. So I don't need to hold everything in my hands all at once. So this I don't need, and I'm not gonna cut this piece. So as you notice, it's just the middle, but I don't wanna hold everything in my hands. So I'm gonna get rid of this. And now I'm just using a piece of the back section. So I want to use what I cut from the back 3 and 4 to now be my traveling guide to follow me through my map of section 2. So there it is, but I always want to use the very last piece, right? So straight across, straight across, straight across at a 90, and it's just traveling with me right to the very front of her hair. Now I'm going to use the chunk next to it that hasn't been cut yet, and this is now going to become, the middle section is going to become my new guide. Make sure you can see it. And there it is, there's my guide. And now I'm gonna cut my last section over here. I don't wanna hold it all in my hand. I wanna use a piece from the back. Make sure you can see your guide, I can't see it. So I need to grab a piece from the middle mohawk. And now I can see it much better. It's right here, my fingers. I'm trying to bend it so you guys can see it, but it's right there. Straight up. Okay. So section 2 has been cut, and if you cut it correctly, you should be able to cross-check opposite the way you cut. So it's going to be horizontal slices, small slices, and you're going to hold them right out at a 90 and it should be nice and even. And then take a section back, hold it right up at a 90, make sure it's nice and even, there's no stragglies. And last one, just make sure it's nice and even. So you can clearly see if you're taking the time to cross-check through your work, you're gonna catch mistakes. So that's the purpose of cross-checking through your work, is that you can see what you've done wrong, if anything. Now for the sides, these are a little bit more difficult, I'm not gonna lie. These are probably the hardest sections of the haircut on a 90 to do. So what I always tell the kids, it's like an L shape. You've cut this section and you've cut this section, right? So those can now become your guides. So I just carve out a little piece from the top and I carve out a little piece from the back, okay? So here's a piece that's been cut from the top and here's a piece that's been cut from the back, okay? So these can help guide my way to cut through the side sections. Okay. So here's my new piece. Remember, you don't really want to cut into this. Please don't cut into this. This is the blunt cut. This is the stuff that needs to remain as length, okay? So I always try to remember that. And then I'm going to take out a little piece. So here's my piece, right? And I told you to take a little from the back. So there's my little bit from the back. And I can grab even a section from the top if I wanted to. A little tiny piece up here to kind of help me. So there, I have all of my indicators of how to marry all these sections together. And I can show you right there. So there's my guide. It's very slight, so I might dig a little deeper. And it will become more obvious. So see, there's your little pieces from the back. Here's the stuff that you're cutting. So straight out at a 90, making sure you see it. Take a piece, leave a piece, because it does get to be a lot in your hands. And there's my guide. And I'm gonna stop before I cut into her length, okay? So I don't wanna cut any of this. This is her length. A little straggly is not much. Okay, so now we're moving forward, right? Because this is the piece that hasn't been cut. So same thing, take a piece, leave a piece. And take a new piece and make sure you can see guide. And I don't want to cut into her length, so I'm dropping it. And there's my guide. Straight out at a 90, straight up. Okay? So then, now this is the very last section right here. I got 2 more slices left. And I need to take a piece and I need to use it to cut this new little section that I just took. And there's my guide. And please don't cut into length. Holding it straight out of her head at a 90. Okay. Now I just get that last section towards the front. And there's my guide. This is the last section. And it's pretty good. And you don't want to cut into length. Perfect. So to cross-check this, same thing holds true. I cut on a vertical, I need to cross-check on a horizontal. So I would try to figure, okay, well this was maybe the middle section. I don't need to cross-check through that, I already did. But this was her side section. So straight out at a 90, and it should be a nice straight line. And I'm just not going to cross-check down too deep because this is her length and I didn't want to cut any holes. I want it to stay as length. Okay, same thing, other side. You have your guide from the top, you have your guide from the back. There's my new section. I just carved out a tiny bit. I want to carve out a little from the back, and I can even take a little pinch from her top. So I can start here, make sure I see the guide, which I do. And careful not to cut into her length. Take another little small slice, straight out at a 90. And drop the length can drop. And there's your guide, cutting right to guide. And make sure you connect it with the top. Okay, I have about 2 more little slices around her face to do. Make sure you can see guide, which I can, it's right there. Again, I don't want to cut into her length. Please drop it. And cut straight up. Make sure you connect it with the top. All right, last piece in front of her face. All right. And there's your 90. So when we turn her back around, same with the 180. Anytime there's layers in the haircut, you really should bring it down and make sure it looks symmetrical. So this piece falls about to her chin. And in the same area, this piece falls to about her chin. So those look pretty symmetrical. And as you work down, there's going to be a disconnect. So in one of the last videos, I showed you how to kind of angle this in and blend it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to frame it around the face a little bit. So anytime you have layers, it's not a bad idea to do that. So again, you're just going to connect it and connect it. Connect it. So there's a nice flow between the shortest layer and her length, right? You don't want to leave a disconnect there.